With Corey Perry out of the lineup for the start of the season, which players will now get an opportunity to fill his spot and make the opening night roster? We'll discuss that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of Locked On NHL Game Night, your place to get a recap of the night in the NHL after every game in the NHL once the regular season gets going. And I'm also a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The countdown to the NHL season is definitely on. The LA Kings will be opening up training camp maybe Thursday, unless I've somehow been dropped out of the LA Kings emailing list. I still haven't seen officially when training camp is opening. I don't know what the big secret is. I think everyone is kind of reporting that Thursday is the start of training camp, at least everybody officially kind of reporting. With the on-ice activities maybe starting on Friday. I know the Kings social media account did put out a funny video of the players on Tuesday answering a question that I didn't understand, and neither did any of the players, but it was a video with the players all in their full uniforms. I think it was the day that all the players were recording the promotional videos that they use on the scoreboard. You know, guys are skating around, doing that kind of thing, the opening of the TV broadcasts, stuff for promotionals on the big screen during that kind of stuff. I think they were filming a lot of stuff today for that. So they are together. They have been skating over the past week or so, informal players only skates, coaches not involved, and training camp again will be getting underway very, very soon. We are 5 days away, just 5 days away from the Kings' first preseason game. That is in Ontario against the Anaheim Ducks. 21 days away from the Kings' regular season opener at home, October 7th against the Colorado Avalanche. But as I mentioned, the team has been skating, and unfortunately, that was where newly acquired Kings forward Corey Perry got hurt last week. He will not be available for the start of the season. He's out 6 to 8 weeks following knee surgery. Meanwhile, on the plus side, if everything goes as planned and his rehab goes smoothly, Perry could be back by the end of October. If it's a little bit longer, if they want to be cautious with it, he should be back by at least mid-November. So Corey Perry is expected to miss anywhere from 12 to 17 games or so. And all things considered, it's not so bad. It's easy for me to say. I'm not the one who got hurt, and I'm not the one who has to go through the rehabilitation process. But frankly, when you heard the report or read the report that he had to be taken into the locker room on a wheelchair, it felt a lot worse, or that it could be a lot worse. So all things considered, not the worst news in the world. That said, he is going to miss the start of the season. And even though it may seem cold, because he's still going to be hopefully a big part of the team, it's now time to focus on who his replacement is going to be, right? Next man up. His misfortune is someone else's opportunity. And that means that someone is going to start the season that otherwise was not going to, and someone's going to make the opening night roster that otherwise would not have done so had it not been for the injury to Corey Perry. Now, the Kings will carry 23 players on the active roster. You've got 12 forwards in the starting lineup, 6 defensemen. You've got the 2 goalies. So that's 20 players right there. So you get 3 extra players that will not dress out for the games or each game. You've got 3 players that will sit out. So what's it going to be for the Kings? Will it be 2 forwards and a defenseman, or is it 2 defensemen and a forward? We don't know. That's a big question that we will have to answer going into camp. Last season, the Kings did typically carry 2 extra defensemen. Will that be the case this season or not? Don't know the answer to that at the moment. Now, Corey Perry was slated to be, as you probably know, on the 4th line, on the left wing, with Joel Armia on the right side, and either Alex Turcotte or Samuel Helenius at center. Now, it would seem to make sense now that this has happened that either Alex Turcotte or Samuel Hellenius will take Corey Perry's place on the wing, and the other player will center that fourth line. Now, Alex Turcotte has played a total of exactly 100 games in his career. He's got 19 goals and 35 points. Last year, he posted 10 goals and 19 points, averaged 11 minutes and 44 seconds of ice time when he was in the lineup, and he won 45.5% of his faceoffs taken. He's 24 years old, limited NHL experience, but has played both wing and center at the NHL level. And while NHL stats don't officially list starts by position, Turcotte's first season, he played 20 games. In 13 of those games, he took 2 or fewer faceoffs. That would suggest to me he's played on the wing in most of those games. Last season, he played 68 games for the Kings. 58 of those games, he took 2 or fewer faceoffs. So most of the NHL experience for Alex Turcotte is playing on the wing. Samuel Hellenius has played a total of 50 NHL games, all from last season. He had 7 points, 4 goals, 3 assists. He averaged 8.38 or 8 minutes and 38 seconds of ice time. He won 46.8% of his faceoffs. He's 22 years old, and he's played mostly center. As a matter of fact, I don't recall Hellenius ever playing on the wing. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but if it did happen, it was not for many games at all. The faceoff stats seem to back that up. In his 50 games, only 7 times did he take 2 or fewer faceoffs. So Turcotte makes the most sense to be the man to fill in for Corey Perry on the wing. From an experience standpoint, when you're talking Turcotte compared to Hellenius, he's played more on the wing. He's played more NHL games, period. And certainly he could make a switch, if you even want to call it that, although Turcotte has played center as well. He seems to be the player that is mostly suited to play on the wing. Now, I thought going into the season, and this was not something that's already been decided, it's something to be decided, or was something to be decided. I thought Turcotte would center Perry and Armia on the fourth line to start the season. Now, unfortunately, circumstances have changed. I believe it will be Hellenius centering the fourth line with Turcotte on the left wing in place of Corey Perry. Now, that is an opinion. That is not a fact. And there are certainly other players that will be looking to, if not get in the starting lineup, certainly being on the open night roster. Like I said, that they weren't necessarily going to be there. So what about some of the other candidates? Well, Akil Thomas would certainly be one of them. The 25-year-old played 25 games last season for the Kings. He had a goal and 3 points, appeared in 32 total games for the Kings with 4 goals and 7 points in his career. Now, Thomas was with the Kings all of last season, but didn't get a lot of playing time and would go long stretches without seeing any game action. And I'm not suggesting Akil Thomas is a key member of the Kings necessarily, but I never really understood why he didn't get more of a chance to play last season, especially after the injury to Tanner Jeannot in late March that caused him to miss the final 12 games of the regular season and the 6 games in the playoffs. Akil Thomas only played in 2 of those 12 games after Tanner Jeannot was injured. It seems to me that Akil Thomas, for whatever reason, didn't seem to have the trust of the coaching staff. It always puzzled me why they wouldn't play him a little bit more. I'm not even suggesting he had to be, a starter on the fourth line, but just get him in the lineup like every 4th game or something like that. Like he would almost go like a whole month without playing. And I didn't really understand if he was in the doghouse or what the situation was, but he just didn't play much. He was just up in the press box most of the game. And it wasn't as if, the players that were out there were clearly better than him. You had Trevor Lewis out there in the lineup. At some points you had Samuel Hellenius out there. I mean, those guys were unproven. So if the Kings don't feel like he can contribute at the NHL level, I'm not sure why you have him on the roster. Hey, it's a new season, new chance for maybe Akil Thomas to show what he can do. We'll see. But Akil Thomas certainly is a guy that, frankly, was probably not going to make the opening night roster had Corey Perry not gotten hurt, and he still might not, but this certainly helps his chances. I would be surprised if we saw him in the lineup on the fourth line playing over somebody like Alex Turcotte, but we'll see. We'll see. Now, when Tanner Jeannot got hurt, the Kings called up forward Jeff Malott, and he had a decent enough season playing in the AHL for the Ontario Reign, 23 goals, 51 points, but he's been a minor leaguer his whole career, and he's not a young prospect anymore at 29 years of age. But it was Jeff Malott and not Akil Thomas that got all the playing time after Tanner Jeannot went down. Malott appeared in the final 12 games last season, and he posted 1 assist. He also played in all 6 playoff games against the Edmonton Oilers. Now, he is a bit more physical than Akil Thomas. He is a bit bigger. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. Akil is 6 foot 195. Certainly the offensive skills for Malott are not as good as Akil Thomas. Akil Thomas is a little bit better offensive player, but clearly the coaching staff preferred Jeff Malott. And you would think that would put him probably ahead of Akil Thomas as far as being in the running to replace Corey Perry on the left wing. He replaced Tanner Jeannot last year, so maybe he replaces Corey Perry this year. I don't think so. I still think, like I said, I think Alex Turcotte would get that spot. Now, if the Kings decide Turcotte's still going to be the center, then I think Jeff Malott is probably the most likely candidate to play on that left side. So he's stronger, he's bigger, a little more nasty. And if you think that there is a value in having a player on your roster that is willing to drop the gloves, Jeff Malott would probably be the one guy that's on the roster in training camp that would fill that job. Andre Lee, I'd also have to say, can't forget about him. Similar player to Jeff Malott, but he's even bigger at 6'5" and 205 pounds. Andre Lee made his NHL debut with the Kings last season, appeared in 19 games early in the year, scored his first career NHL goal, and totaled 3 points as well. So Andre Lee, also keep him in mind possibly as being a replacement or maybe a guy who would get the nod over a Jeff Malott or a Akil Thomas and be that extra forward on the roster. All right, up next, we'll talk about the most interesting and exciting option to replace Corey Perry while he's out of action. We'll do that next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sunday. So what are you waiting for? Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, LA Kings new forward Corey Perry out for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season following knee surgery. And we're talking about players that might fill his spot on the right side, on the fourth line, and players who might make the roster with an extra spot now available. The most interesting name by far as a candidate to replace Corey Perry, as a candidate to be on the Kings roster to start the season, is rookie Liam Greentree. 19-year-old first-round pick from 2 seasons ago. Just wrapped up his second rookie camp, took part in the Golden State rookie faceoff over the weekend. I thought he looked fine in the 2 games. He didn't score a goal, had an assist, played on the top line in both of those games, had some good scoring chances, had one off the post. So going into the season, Liam Greentree was a real long shot to make the Kings roster. He certainly is the one forward you look at right now that is most likely to be an NHL player sooner rather than later, but most likely now is not going to be the time for him. And it's not because he isn't necessarily talented enough, but really there were just no spot for him in the lineup to play. Obviously, that's now changed with the injury to Corey Perry. Now, as has been mentioned, the rules as they currently stand say that Liam Greentree cannot play in the AHL this season because of his age, 19 years old. He has to either return to his junior team or he can play on the LA Kings. He cannot go to the Ontario Reign. Now, there is a chance that rule could change at some point this season that would allow him to play in the AHL, but that's to be determined. The rule is going to change starting next season, and there's a push to fast track it to put it in place for this year, but that's to be determined. While that gets sorted out, the Kings now have a spot and an opportunity to allow Greentree to play in 9 games to start the season. He can play in 9 games. Rookies can play in 9 games without their entry-level contract kicking in. So again, Liam Greentree can play in 9 games. He can then be sent back to his junior team, and his contract does not kick in at that point. So they're not burning a year of his contract. The Kings did this with rookie defenseman Brant Clark. You might remember a couple seasons ago, 2022-23, Clark played in 9 games for the Kings to start the season. They then sent him to Ontario for a 5-game conditioning assignment before finally returning him to his junior team. Clark, like Greentree, had nothing to prove with another level of junior hockey. He was ready to take the next step, but the rules are the rules, and so the Kings had to send him back to his junior team, but they didn't do it until they were able to use all the rules at their disposal to get him as much professional experience as they could before they had to adhere to the rules. Now, the argument for the Kings doing this with Liam Greentree is pretty simple. Just like with Clark, you're giving a player that you really believe is going to be an NHL level player at some point invaluable experience at the highest level, giving him a taste of what it's like to play in the NHL and just to see how he handles it. Whet his appetite. Give him a taste of what the NHL is all about, and I'm sure it will motivate him to work harder and get there even more, because playing at that highest level and all the things that come with being an NHL player obviously is very exciting. With all due respect, it's a lot better than being a junior player. It's a lot better than playing an AHL player. So if Liam Greentree is amazing in training camp, and frankly, he wasn't amazing in the rookie face-off. He was okay. But if he has a great camp, if he plays in some of these preseason games and scores some goals and looks really, really strong, then certainly that would help his chances of being on the roster to start the season. It's still very unlikely he would be on the Kings roster for the entire season. He would have to just completely blow the doors off everything for that to happen. But just to help fill in before Corey Perry comes back, I think he's definitely the most exciting option to do that. Now, the argument against the Kings having Liam Greentree on the opening night roster or even in the lineup is that do you feel like you can be experimenting with the roster to start the season? And it's a season for the Kings that's going to start off with a lot of road games and against a lot of teams that made the playoffs last year. This is not an easy start to the season for the LA Kings. In their first 11 games, 8 of them are on the road. Of the 8 road games, 5 of those opponents made the playoffs a year ago. And it starts off very tough. Home Colorado, next night at Vegas. Then you got a trip to Winnipeg, who was the President's Trophy winners from a year ago. So the argument against it is, hey, look, the Kings have to put their absolute best lineup out there, even if it's a fourth liner. You're not going to be experimenting and seeing how a young player might, get some experience and whet his appetite. Hey, you got to put whoever the best players are, you put them out there because you need to get off to a good start and get this season off on the right foot. In the end, though, for me, I'm for giving Liam Greentree a look. I think it's very unlikely that anything a player on the fourth line over a stretch of 9 games is going to do anything that's detrimental to the Kings' playoff hopes. If it does, then the Kings likely weren't deserving of a playoff spot to begin with, or if they were going to get in the playoffs, they weren't going to do anything anyway. If a fourth line guy over 9 games decides what happens to the fate of the LA Kings this season, then maybe they weren't a very good team to begin with. So for me, let's make the most out of a bad situation. Let's use this opportunity to get a look at Liam Greentree, see how he responds to playing at the NHL level. And by the way, if you put him out there and it turned, let's say worst case scenario, he's not ready for it, well, then you just take him out of the lineup and send him back to his junior team. You don't have to play him for 9 games. That's just the maximum number of games you can play him before you have to make a decision. So play him for those 9 games. Let's get a look at him. Let's make, this unfortunate situation into something that's positive, a little bit exciting to see a future LA King, we think, get his feet wet, get his first NHL experience. I would love to see it. I don't know if the Kings will do it or not, but certainly the injury to Corey Perry opens up the possibilities of Liam Greentree starting the year with the LA Kings. There's still some other things to be decided for the LA Kings as they get ready to open up training camp. We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs. Put your post at the top of the page. Helps you to reach the right candidates faster. If you've been in a spot where you need to hire right away, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/locked on. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. So we talked about Corey Perry being out of the Kings lineup. That's not the only decision the Kings have to make as far as the roster. Now, most of the lineup is set, even with the loss to Corey Perry. But again, they'll have to decide, do they want to keep 2 forwards, 1 defenseman, 1 forward, 2 defensemen? And as it stands right now, there is a decision to be made, likely between 2 defensemen, and that's Jacob Moverar and Kyle Burroughs. Now, as long as everyone else stays healthy on the blue line between now and the start of the season, it's going to probably be between Moverar and Burroughs. Unless the Kings keep 2 defensemen, then they'll both make it. But if that's not the case, one of those guys will have to go. Now, not go off the team necessarily, but or I should say out of the organization. It's possible because they will have to go through waivers if the Kings send them down. But most likely, which one will not start the season in the NHL? So I would say if you're looking and comparing the 2 guys, Jacob Moverar has the edge physically. He's 6'3", 210. Burroughs is generously listed as 6', 190. Burroughs has a little more seasoning. He's played in the NHL a little bit more, 201 games for Kyle Burroughs compared to 94 for Jacob Moverar. Moverar a little bit more solid defensively. Burroughs gives you a little bit more offensively, but not much. Moverar is a left-handed shot. Burroughs is a right-handed shot. So it's not, it's not a huge decision. My preference, though, would be, I think Jacob Moverar, if you're going to pick between one of those 2 guys, he's the guy to pick. More defensively sound. And if you're in a fill-in role, that's really what you want for the most part. You want a guy who's solid defensively, first and foremost. And I think if you were going to have to place one of those guys on waivers, if you were not going to keep 2 defensemen, I think Kyle Burroughs has a better chance of being claimed. Or I should say, I think Kyle Burroughs has a better chance of being not claimed. I think Jacob Moverar could be attractive to an NHL team. I don't think Kyle Burroughs would be as much. Like I said, he's older. He's not as big. For Moverar, I think a team might want to scoop him up. So Burroughs, to me, is the odd man out if it's a decision between which one of those 2 guys to keep. I did see something I wanted to mention real quick, an article in The Athletic, and it was titled, quote, "One burning question for every NHL team heading into training camp," end quote. And of course, my curiosity was piqued. I scrolled down and I said, what are they saying is this burning question for the LA Kings? So friend of the show, Eric Stevens of The Athletic, posted this as the Kings burning question going into training camp. And he said, quote, "There is an ominous feeling that this group is just running in place. 4 straight first-round losses to the same team will do that to you. To top it off, this last defeat to the Oilers felt like a series they truly blew, considering how the Kings finally gained home ice advantage and were up 2-0. And new GM Ken Holland didn't win any support with the roster changes he made. It's a good club littered with effective players, not a great one led by a superstar too in his prime. How will this year be any different? That's the conundrum to break in what is likely Andrei Kopitar's final season," end quote. So I guess the burning question is, how will this year be any different? I think that's likely the burning question as far as the upcoming season. I was a little thrown off by the headline to me. And, Usually the writers, by the way, don't write the headlines. It's somebody else to kind of get your attention. But to me, if you're asking what's the burning question for the LA Kings going into training camp, that's something that's going to be decided in training camp. And I think we talked about it on this episode. I think the burning question is who replaces Corey Perry to start the season. So as far as what Eric Stevens had to say, I thought a lot of it was pretty true. I think there was one thing, though, I might take issue with, and that was what he said about Ken Holland. And I know if you're on social media, there's plenty of vocal people complaining about the moves Ken Holland made. But to be honest, I've heard from just as many people, if not more, that actually do believe the Kings are better this year than they were last year. So I don't know that I agree necessarily with the statement that Eric Stevens made about Ken Holland when he said he didn't do any favors or something like that. I didn't win any support with his roster changes. I don't know that that's true. It certainly wasn't exciting, but I think there's a lot of people out there who think the Kings are better this year to start the season. Now, I will say where Eric Stevens hits the nail on the head, though, is when he says about the Kings, quote, "It's a good club littered with effective players, not a great one led by a superstar or two in his prime," end quote. That unfortunately is true. And it does sting a bit to hear it put that way, but honesty is what it is. And I really can't disagree with that. And yeah, we love Adrian Kempe. Maybe Quentin Byfield is going to be that player one day. It's not now. Darcy Kemper, I know, Vezina Trophy finalist last season. But if you look across the hockey world and you ask people, are there any superstars on the LA Kings? And even if you ask Kings fans, I think if they're honest, they would say, no superstars. There are some good players for sure, but not any real marquee type players, if we're being honest. We're all hoping that a really good group without many weaknesses can be the difference. But I think Eric Stevens probably was right when he said no true superstars on this team in their prime to kind of lead the way. But as far as the answer to the burning question, how will this year be different? Unfortunately, we're not going to know the answer to that until the end of the season and the playoffs. And that actually is going to lead into our next show. All of the hosts on the Locked On NHL Network ranked their top 100 current players in the NHL. How many Kings players are on the list? Who was the highest ranked Kings player? How do the Kings compare to other Pacific Division teams in terms of numbers of players in the top 100? We're going to discuss all of that and more coming up in our next episode. For you everydayers, those you listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, as always, we'll have our Friday fan feedback show coming up at the end of the week. Feel free to chime in with your thoughts on today's show. Who do you think will take Corey Perry's spot on the fourth line? And who do you think the Kings will keep on their opening night roster? If you want to get an email in for that show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please post your comments in the comment section. We'd love for you to stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. If you could, tell your LA Kings friends and coworkers about the show. Word of mouth is a great way to get people exposed to the show. I've talked to people and like, oh, I really love your show, but I didn't find out about it until at the end of last season. So just getting the word out there about the show is something that I'd love for you guys to help me out with. So if you have friends that are hockey fans, Kings fans, coworkers, like I said, let them know about the show. I'd really appreciate it. And if you want even more Kings coverage, exclusive content you cannot get anywhere else, drop me an email, lakingsextra@gmail.com, and we'll give you the information on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.